So, on the face of it, there's nothing inherent in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and of 12-step work that should shape your politics any particular left or right direction. Just as Christianity is almost infinitely flexible, and same with Judaism in the terms of the politics that it can accommodate. But just thought I'd just ruminate, think out loud about how my pretty much daily 12-step work, 12-step participation, 12-step programs, 12-step friends, 12-step program calls, and how does that affect my my politics? And it's not going to be making me more right-wing or less right-wing, but it's kind of how I go about it. And I think one thing it does is that don't know why I don't get to see the live chat anymore. Really miss that. I used to be able to look at the live chat every time I came to a stop and get some feedback, but just not showing up anymore on my iPhone using the YouTube app. But one effect of doing this 12-step work is that I'm considerably less likely to be angry and resentful. So if you watch my live streams, you may notice that I'm always fairly calm, very rarely get rattled, very rarely get angry. I'll get passionate at times, but I've never had to remove anything I've said on a live stream because I lost control and said things that I regretted. That just has not happened. And I credit 12-step work for that. And part of that is that 12-step work places great emphasis on living in reality and being right-sized. Not that you have a low view of yourself, not that you don't assert yourself, but it's important to have a right-sized view of yourself, to have a correct understanding of your own importance. And from the 12-step perspective, if you are disturbed, then that means there's something wrong with you. That meaning, in essence, that there's a part of reality that you have not accepted. And of course, I'm not able to live completely without ever any sense of disturbance, but I'd say pretty much 98% of the time, I just glide through life without any sense of emotional disturbance. And then those times I do get disturbed is because there's some aspect of reality that I can't accept, such as my inabilities to figure out a technological problem, or that I can't control other people, and so their behavior may be negatively affecting me, and I'm just getting irate about it. That happens at times. So a good thing about 12-step work is that it keeps reinforcing the idea that we don't have control over other people, and we don't control gravity. We don't control earthquakes and earth, wind, and fire. And so this kind of right-sized, more accurate sense of yourself, understanding that you can't control other people, you can't, as an individual, control America's immigration policy or welfare policy or tax policy. That brings a great deal of a sense of calm, and so much less tendency towards hysteria or vituperation. So I don't see my political enemies as evil people, bad people. Aha, I can see the chat. Whoa, this is exciting. Okay. Good to see you, libertarianism there. Thanks for the heads up. So I think 12-step work has helped me not to see people on the left as just evil, but instead to look at them as they're just like me, except they have different life experiences, different genetics, so different imprinting, different genes, and it's not so much that they see the world differently from me, but they fundamentally experience the world differently from me, and they put their values on different things to different degrees than I do. So let's take George W. Bush. His 2003 invasion of Iraq was just an absolute disaster. Absolute disaster. Cost the United States of America about $5 trillion. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis died. Plunged the region into instability. Okay, absolute disaster. And so I agree with Steve Saylor that George W. Bush was essentially a lazy man who just wanted to throw the long ball, was willing to take this biggest risk ever in American foreign policy, and it turned out to be an absolute disaster. And I can reflect, okay, what about me? Where have I stand someone like George W. Bush, who's just not living in reality, because that's been me much of my life. Just delusional risk-taking, unnecessary risk-taking, like an inflated sense of his own importance. Don't you find it easy to be resentful following politics? I did prior to 12-step work, but by doing 12-step work, I just very rarely have any sense of resentment. Another part of 12-step work that has affected me with regard to politics is that I abstain from politics essentially the first 2.5 hours of my day, unless there's something extraordinary happening. First 2.5 hours of my day, stay away from politics, I stay away from my email, I stay away from social media, I stay away from the news. I get spiritually centered the first 2.5 hours of the day. And that gets my day off to a good start. And then when I'm spiritually centered, then I read the news. Okay, so if I was just to start the morning reading the LA Times, New York Times, Washington Post, which are the three news sources I check first, I would have a chip on my shoulder. I'd be angry, I'd be annoyed, I'd be ticked off, I would tend towards resentment, and I'd be in a bad spiritual place. We kind of have a chip on my shoulder, and it would get my day off, in a bad way. Like, find that the more you consume the news, the more negative of an effect it has on my happiness. But in moderate doses, if I consume the news after first getting spiritually centered and spiritually oriented, then consuming the news doesn't turn me into an angry, nasty person. So 12 steps help me not to see people who disagree with me on politics as evil, but instead to just try to see, okay, how can I identify with them? We all have basic instincts for social status, for sexual and romantic satisfaction, and for survival. So, how are their basic instincts reflecting in their politics? Getting angry, I know, is not going to do any good. Have an accurate sense of my own place in the world and of my own abilities. For example, I don't speak Russian, so I'm not an expert on Russian history or Russian policy. I'm not fluent in Hebrew, so it's really not for me to make a lot of religious pronouncements about Judaism or the Torah, in that I'm not fluent in the the original language of the Torah. I don't know Chinese, so I shouldn't pretend that I'm any kind of expert on China. So just having an accurate sense of oneself. Okay, check who are blocked in your account settings. Google is putting people on block for saying non-leftist proof things. What? I was just blocked using several nicks on a live stream after challenging the Hitlerite. Okay, when you say Google is putting people on block, is that in the comment section? Sounds what you're talking about is in chat. There's been an explosion of Google moderating chat. And you would think that this would be a logical step for Google to take, because YouTube doesn't really want people in chat sections saying 1488, Hitler was right, gas the Jews, lynch the Nogs. Like, that's not what YouTube wants in its chat section. So it would make sense that Google, YouTube censorship would start hitting chat sections much more strongly than they have. That is the next logical step. So how does 12-step work affect my relationship to social media censorship? And that is to live in reality that social media companies, like all businesses, exist to make money, and they need to keep their regulators appeased, and so it would make sense that a social media platform does not want certain forms of speech on its platform. Now, that can outrage me, but that doesn't do any good. I need to live in reality. I need to understand where other people are coming from, like where other people see the world. One of the life-changing experiences I had was in a writing all these stories about my tumultuous relationship with my girlfriend, and the teacher said, well, why don't you write about things from her perspective? And I thought, wow, that's a good idea. So there are a lot of mods on neo-Nazi streams who love to block them. So maybe you're talking about social media, YouTube, that you're getting blocked on streams by the moderators on those streams. So that's not YouTube blocking you, that's the moderators of those streams, or even the creators of those streams. So I can look at the issues of social media censorship from YouTube. Okay, so the moderators of streams blocking people, that's not new. But I can look at things from, say, YouTube's perspective. YouTube has never turned a profit, all right? So YouTube's path to profitability is primarily through attracting advertising. Advertisers don't want to advertise on politically controversial streams, by and large, because activists from either side can say, hey, McDonald's here is advertising on a stream that's discussing, I don't know, white genocide or some other highly controversial topic. So when I try to understand things from YouTube's perspective, from Twitter's perspective, even though it clashes with my own free speech instincts, it puts me back into reality that different people and different organizations have different priorities than me. And so it just has a calming effect, I guess, on my politics. So there's another 12-step approach that nobody's better or worse than anyone else. And that's very different from a right-wing approach, in that a right-wing approach to life recognizes hierarchy. That there's hierarchy in nature, there's hierarchy among people, that different peoples have statistically verifiable different gifts, and by and large that we should be ruled by the best of us, not just giving it an equal vote to every idiot who breathes. And so that's a significant difference between my politics and my 12-step approach to life. So 12-step approach to life is that nobody's better or worse than anyone else. And that really does calm me down. When I'm able to look at the world through that perspective, that nobody's better or worse than anyone else, it just has a calming effect as I go about my day. But, for example, that doesn't mean I then want open borders. Okay? So I take the spiritual approach of 12-step work to how I conduct myself during the day with other people, but I don't give it a veto over my politics. So even though 12-step approach is nobody's better or worse than anyone else, that doesn't mean that I want every idiot voting, doesn't mean that I'm a big fan of democracy in politics, doesn't mean that I support open borders, doesn't mean that I don't support expelling people who are here illegally. It doesn't mean that I'm going to pause in standing up for my interests, my group's interests, my nation's interests, as they oppose other people's interests. So 12-step recognizes that we're constantly clashing, that individuals and groups are often in conflict because we have different interests. And so from 12-step, I guess I learn the importance of understanding the other person's point of view. So I guess that has a calming effect on my politics. By and large, I've found, at least in Los Angeles, most people who go to 12-step meetings are on the left because, okay, Jay Walker says, Luke, did you know that Rockefeller offered to fund AA but then reneged? No. I think what happened, Jay, is that Rockefeller saw that that funding AA from the outside would be a disaster. And so even though he donated some money, he saw it'd be much more important for members of AA to fund it themselves. And so Rockefeller and other outsiders who donated to AA got complete refunds on all their donations. AA does not accept donations from anyone who's not an alcoholic, and it does not accept donations over about $2,000 a year. So I think that's a sterling example. I don't know of any other organization that refuses donations. But let's continue this conversation, Jay Walker.